extended coverage as Israel expands Operation Brother's Keeper in search of the 3 kidnapped teens. Israeli security forces raid Nablus and continue arrests of Hamas members as the families of the missing teens meet. The fight in Iraq approaches Baghdad. Troops of the Iraqi army engage in heavy clashes with Sunni Islamist militants 60 kilometers from the capital city. And in Brazil, all the teams will conclude their first game in the World Cup tournament today. The highlight when the host Brazil is matched up against Mexico. Welcome back to the news today. This is the Daily Debate. The sweeping advance of the Al-Qaeda-linked organization ISIL through western Iraq has sent shockwaves across the region. It's such a dramatic event. It has even brought the U.S. and Iran closer in discussion of how to halt the militant advance. But what and who is behind this group, and just how much power does it have? Joining me tonight is Dr. Anat Hochberg. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you very much for coming. Marom, an expert on global terrorism and marketing. Thank you very much for coming. And Iranian political analyst Meir Javed Anfar. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Lucy.
So let's try to first look at the current situation. Is it really possible that Iran and the United States will, I see your smile already, will cooperate against Iraq?
And there's an old saying that 2 flowers don't make a garden.
I love your sayings.
Thank you very much. No, I think people should hold their enthusiasm who are that believe that Iran and America all of a sudden willing to work together. And I don't mean you. I mean there's some newspaper articles already talking about full rapprochement and Iran and America cooperating. No. They had a brief chat yesterday. First of all, it would be good if they could cooperate for the stability. But if they're going to cooperate on Iraq, they should cooperate on Syria. But Iran is not going to cooperate on Syria. And I don't think, because of the domestic audiences in America and domestic opposition in Iran, the 2 sides will be able to have a rapprochement. In Iran, we have to remember, they don't, there's a lot of resistance to rapprochement with the US from the conservatives. And I think, they would be very suspicious of America in this case, to have full cooperation with America. And of course, President Obama now to start cooperating with Iran. He's got Congress coming up, elections. What would the pro-Israel lobby say in America if he's seen as being too friendly to Iran? It will cost him votes. I think what we're probably looking at here is perhaps at best some intelligence sharing regarding ISIL. But apart from that, I don't see this going beyond.
So let's try to understand who is the ISIL, because we're used to say Al-Qaeda, we're used to say Hamas, we're used to say Muslim Brotherhoods. We are not used to say ISIL. Who are they?
Okay, first of all, we have to know that in Al-Qaeda in general and ISIS or ISIL in particular is the Salafist, the global jihad, the Salafist, the most extreme terror organization in the area of the Middle East. Actually, this is one of the worst times that we see what happens right now in Iraq, and especially also in Syria, is the extremist part of their organization. They want to ruin, to change the Middle East routine life to topple Bashar al-Assad and to help topple the Nour al-Maliki. To overthrow the governments and to make a new political order, which not based on religious, on secular, not on secular rules, but on religious rules.
Do they have
Sharia laws?
Sorry, do they have like a health system like Hezbollah and Hamas? Do they have a health and education system, or is it just solely a jihadi model?
Actually, they try to, and for the last year, that's what they did already. They just they raised the. It's not raised, but they established a new, let's say, civil. It's not service, but they built some schools, some kindergartens, some options to let, in order to influence the public, the population. They just try to go into the soft part on the other side of the not only terrorist attacks, but also to go easily to the population, to come closer to. We saw it in Syria, and we see it right now in Iraq.
But when you see this amount of people being murdered and being killed and being exploded, this is the way that the population in these countries are, you can actually convince them that you are doing good to them when you're killing your own people?
It's not to convince them. You cause them to be feared of. You listen, Al-Qaeda is a big changer here. It has a lot of power, which goes on one hand on fear and obedience, and just because we're afraid of what they're doing, it's better to go to your to your foe, to your enemy, instead of be slaughtered and to be murdered by the terrorist organization. But on the other hand, if you look further, when we look at what's going on in the internet, in the social networks, there's lots of works done there in order to influence people to come over, and the radicalization and all what's going on now with the militant messages that they're just promoted and distributed all over the social networks. It works because it consists when they repeat the messages, they go into they influence the hearts and minds of the Muslim people.
So let's try right now to get back to Iran and the United States, and try to explain to me, Meir, how come Iraq is different than Syria in the eyes of the United States?
This is a very good question, actually, because you see, if Assad used chemical weapons against Syrian people, Assad crossed President Obama's red line. He did nothing. If Obama now attacks Iraq, he didn't attack in Syria. If he attacks Iraq, he would be sending a message to WMD, people who are intending to use WMD in the future, that politics and self-interest come before use of the WMDs. And I support President Barack Obama, but I think this is one of the gravest mistakes he's made. Why is he more concerned about Baghdad? Because America spent 8 years and thousands upon thousands of American lives and billions of American taxpayers' money to show that it succeeded. And for it to walk away and for this thing to fall apart, plus the fact that there's a U.S. embassy with, if I'm not mistaken, I think thousands of people. It's like a military base.
275 people, soldiers to Iraq to defend.
I mean, it's not an embassy. It's like a mini city. So they have an interest to prop it up. And of course, if Iraq falls in the hand of the Sunni militants, there is the concern. There's an excellent article by David Ignatius that Al-Qaeda and ISIS may want to prove who is more anti-American and what's the best way to do that, to target the homeland in the United States. So this is very important. And to be honest, and the last point, when Americans look at extremist Shia and extremist Sunni, they prefer the extremist Shia.
So in a minute I'll ask you why they prefer the extremist Shia, but how come just in 1 week we started hearing Iraq again? Because until now, explosions and people who are
That's exactly
dead.
what the Iranians are saying. They're saying that all of a sudden Bashar al-Assad gets elected. All of a sudden Bashar al-Assad is winning in Syria, and then boom, this group comes in, starts this major attack. And they're not saying it, but I think we have to ask questions.
So
how did they?
The reason? Why?
Well, let's think. Maybe one small reason could be, and it could be one. Somebody maybe gave them a call from Mosul to say there's $430 million in cash sitting in this bank, which is what they confiscated.
Yes.
Right.
And if they got that call and there's that amount of money sitting in the bank waiting for them, plus perhaps some Kuwaiti or Saudi family wanted to counterbalance Assad's progress, then you have motive and you have the means to do it.
So you are you want to?
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with you. I think the reason here is a mixture of reasons, and when you look at the map and you take step back, it's not one of a sudden that just happened. A week ago Bashar al-Assad was elected. It's not that suddenly it happens. Al-Qaeda is going deeper and deeper and becoming stronger, but
this is not Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda disowned ISIS.
Right.
Because they're too extremist. Imagine now Al-Qaeda is actually moderate today.
Yes, as compared to the
ISIS. The new Middle East.
Yeah.
Where Al-Qaeda is moderate.
That's exactly what I anticipated, that the ISIS will be a lot more tougher, brutal, and even a nightmare for the Sunnis in Syria as well as in Iraq.
What's fascinating here, Lucy, is that our colleague, sorry, I forgot your name, apologies, is saying that ISIS, Dr. Anat Hochberg-Marom, she says ISIS has a social model. Al-Qaeda, as far as I know, did not have a social model. And with these movements, it's the social model that gives them longevity. It's the social model that gave Hamas the longevity, gave Hezbollah the longevity. And this is what I think makes them very dangerous.
You know, what makes the situation, maybe when I see, and from what I'm reading and from what I'm, just watching, is the mixture of money, religion, power, and terror all together combined, and this is something that, and a lot of interest,
and
a lot of political
outside players.
I would say idealism and pragmatism. I would say this is very strong faith with the Sunni, the harsh interpretation of the Sharia law, as compared, as well with all along together with very political power, when they just, they gain a lot of power. They gain they influence public idea and public opinion by fear and by terror attacks and all this stuff. But altogether, when you take the idealism with the very strong faith, but you also take the money, you take the manpower, you recruit people, many thousands of people that come from abroad, not only from Arab states, but also from Europe and the States.
Perfect.
You put it all together, nobody can stand by them.
Point. There's three factors here. The Sunnis being discriminating against Shia in all Sunni countries. Just look at Bahrain and look at Saudi Arabia. The Shia, where they have the majority isolating the Sunnis. Look at what Nouri al-Maliki has done. Look at Iran. Tehran is the only capital city in the Middle East where a Jew can build a synagogue, but a Sunni can't build a mosque.
Right.
So you have on the two sides. Plus, in 2 years, there have been more foreign jihadis fighting in Syria than the 10 years in Afghanistan. And you know what, Lucy? Sometimes these foreign jihadis who turn up from Belgium, from the UK, they are more fanatic than the people who live here. And this is one thing that really makes the situation far more toxic than it is.
I want to take it maybe one step forward, and maybe this is for Iran plays perfect in their cards, because for Iran right now, the entire world, what you're saying, from what I'm hearing from you, this is even more dangerous than maybe a nuclear bomb, because the influence that you can have on people with money, with power, with religion, it's bigger than just to have a bomb and sanctions. And
I don't think it's more dangerous than the sanctions, because the regime can't lose stability because of this, but it can lose stability over sanctions. But one thing that's very important for Iran has to defend its interests when there's extremist Sunnis who are slaughtering Shia in Iraq, because if Iran doesn't protect its allies in Iraq, nobody's going to rely on Iran. So in the short term, it's a victory for Iran, but in the long term, I think that the Revolutionary Guard may have just walked into a trap. Look at it. Look at it.
Look at Iran.
They are stuck in Syria.
Yep.
It costs lives. It costs money, and it gets them isolated. Now they're stuck in Iraq. It costs lives, it makes them isolated, and they're going to have casualties. Iran is now involved in two battlefields in this region. This is really going to drain the Revolutionary Guard, and it's going to make them even more isolated. So yes, Iran does have its own interests, but if you look at the other side of the coin, now when the Arabs look at Persians, there are Persians in Syria, there are Persians in Iraq, and this is going to make this region, unfortunately, an even more miserable place than it even is.
That's why I also argued that's why the global jihad is becoming stronger.
Because they're racist also.
Yeah.
They don't refer to Iranians as Shia, they refer to Iranians as Safavi Shia. Because Safavs were the first Persian dynasty who brought Shiism. So not only they're not proper Shia, they're like Persian fake Shia.
Anat, you started saying a sentence.
No, I just said that the reason that we should look and just make all the preparations regarding the global jihad is that it's not there. It's not theirs. It's ours problem. It's all over all the country. I mean, all the regions. Sorry, not only in Israel, but as far as Iran becoming a bit weaker by daily, by weekly, or by monthly time, we just have to, I think, to focus on the global jihad in the Middle East.
We are trying to focus. We have only 45 seconds. And what I wanted to ask you, you started saying that for the United States, they prefer Shia and not Sunni. How come?
Because they're afraid. This is the first, what I can say, they're afraid of committing again to another country to go to help to Syria and Iraq. They cannot. Iraq's supposed to be there.
So, unfortunately, I have only 16 minutes with you. Dr. Anat Hochberg-Marom, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
And Mayor Javed Anfar, always a pleasure. Thank you very much. And we're going out for a small break, 2-minute break, and then we will be back for the I-24 News one-on-one. Don't go anywhere.